Hi everyone, it's Rax. I want to make a video talking to you about Necro Minions because everyone and their grandma is playing it right now. I want to share with you everything that I know about it. I just spent about 1 hour talking with one of the best Necros in the world, Macro Boy. He's a writer for Maxroll for Diablo 4 and Diablo 2. He's the Necro class guy along with Chronix. He's a really good friend of mine and a super brilliant mind. I have a link to his channel down below. I'm going to answer as many questions for you as possible and explain to you how you should be thinking about minions and show you some funny things. And that way you can absolutely dominate when you're playing. The purpose of this video, there'll be a planner here from Macro, and there's also the guides on Maxroll as well. The purpose of this video is just to give you knowledge so you can feel confident in making decisions about building your minion necro and how you want to do things and what you should be doing while you're leveling up, speed farming in the end game. And if you don't care about any of that and just want to make the laziest build possible that just automatically blows everything up. Okay, so before we do that, let's talk about something basic. And by the way, you know this video is going to be good because not only do I have paint up, but I also have a planner with multiple different variants, and I have Diablo 4 up. So we're going to be looking at a lot of stuff right now. Let's start with the very first thing. What Book of the Dead things should you use, which is essentially picking what minions you use. Okay, so if we go in here and we look at our choices, there is really only one option, and I'll show you in a moment. But there's only two things you would ever take. You can take defenders with the skeletal defenders taunt enemies. And the reason why you would take that is they build massive stagger. So if you're fighting like a super hard boss, then the taunt is a shitload of stagger. And then you win, right? But the Reapers are better. And now let's consider the two options. The wind-up attack reduces our cooldowns, or the Reapers have a chance to form a corpse. Both of these are absolutely godly for our build. So which one should we take? Well, let's try the reduce cooldown one first. And let's jump over here. And let's start attacking here, and let's start summoning our friends. Okay, well, let's Army of the Dead so we can get our friends up. Okay, now watch my Army of the Dead cooldown. As they attack, obviously with the cooldown, eventually when they swing, the cooldown should be coming down, right? All right, there it goes. It's going down, it's resetting it, and we get to use our ultimate, right? Okay, that's super awesome. Well, let's go back in and let's check the other one. 15% chance to form a corpse. Okay, so now they all died. So let's summon them back. Now they're going to give me corpses and use my Army of the Dead. Watch my Army of the Dead cooldown. Are you noticing anything? Well, in addition to summoning all the corpses, for some reason, it also reduces your cooldowns because it's busted. It's broken. It's been reported to Blizzard. Rax made a video on it. Now Blizzard's going to fix it. They already know. But I don't know if they're going to fix it this season. So that means Reapers with the corpses is by far the best option because it gives you both of them. So if you were using the cooldown one, that's not the one to use. Now, the reason why the cooldown is so important, as you'll see, is we're going to talk about the ultimates, which is massive for Necros. But don't sleep on the corpses either, because the corpses give you essence and they empower your minions. A lot of people don't understand that after you've summoned all of your minions, when you summon another one, you get a Skeletal Priest. It empowers your minions and it increases their damage by 30% and heals them, right? But there is also a power that you can take, which gives you some of the effectiveness onto yourself, but your minions gain all of your stats as well, so it gives them another multiplier. So you need to be pressing Raise Skeleton all the time on all of the builds. And so spawning the corpses all the time is very helpful. So when they fix both of them, it's going to be hard to say which one's better. Hopefully, in the super end game, you will have good enough cooldown that you can actually take the corpse one anyway. But until Blizzard fixes it, and they might not fix it the entire season, This is by far the best unless you're fighting a boss, and then you could maybe use the taunt. Okay, so continuing on, we have the mages. Now, if you're not playing Shadow, then you have a couple of options. Some people like to use the cold one to apply vulnerable. Vulnerable is very nice. But later on, you're going to see if you're going to play mages, you're probably going to play Shadowblight. And the answer is they're both very strong. The increased damage one is almost certainly the one you will take if you're going to play your Golem. And we're going to explain the difference between mages and golems later. So if you're playing Golem, you want the increased damage because you get the increased damage and then you pass it along to your Golem. When we play Golem, we're all in on Golem. So that's why this is the best option. And this is a very good option if you're leveling up, you have bad gear, or you need help proccing Shadowblight, which we'll cover in a second. So the Shadow ones are usually the best option, or the cold for vulnerable if you're not doing the Shadowblight. And then finally, we come to the Golem, and almost everybody uses this Blood Golem because it gives them damage reduction and 50% increased damage. Every time you start stacking all of these multipliers, and the additive damage with the separate multipliers, that's when your Golem is going to start crushing everything. And when you're thinking endgame, you really should be thinking Golem, Golem, Golem. You might be sitting here thinking, yeah, but look how many other skellies I have, and look at my Golem. No. You got to think about it the other way. Your Golem is big dick, and everybody else is, nah. You'll see in a moment. But the one that I love to use until you get to the end game is this one. He takes 30% of the damage you would take. It's probably because I play hardcore. That's usually the ones that people use because the multiplier is just so strong. I've seen some people using this Iron Golem, but I think the blood people are finding that the blood one with the multiplier is just better. So now we've covered the Book of the Dead. You use the Reapers with this. You use the Shadow Mages, either one of these. This one's definitely better for the Golems. And then for the Golem, if you're playing hardcore, you probably use the Blood Golem, takes your damage. Otherwise, you take the one with the multiplier. All right? So we have that done. So now let's talk about using Army of the Dead and the key passives versus how you would... Let's talk about the different builds as you level up. For this, we're going to go to the planners. Okay, so let's go down here. Kalans. All of your minions get 3% attack speed for each active minion. Attack speed is godly. Not just godly for the breakpoints for your minions to attack faster, but also because of this legendary Paragon node where they get multiplicative damage for every 20% attack speed. This is why attack speed is so absolutely amazing and critical. So you might sit here and think, well, this is absolutely godly, and you would be right. So when you're leveling up without any gear or without any synergy, and you're at the mercy of with whatever Diablo is going to drop for you, this is pretty much probably the best way to go. And then you can just go with Army of the Dead. An Army of the Dead has a power where it's just going to give your minions increased damage and take reduced damage. So the gameplay is very simple while you're leveling up. Your minions just get a massive amount of attack speed. I believe it's 6 and 5 in a Golem. That's 12. That's 36% attack speed. That's very, very significant. And then you have your nuke button. Whenever you see something scary, you press Army of the Dead and they die. This will carry you easily all the way up to 100 into the early level pits. And again, because you don't have a lot of great synergy, you don't have the right cooldown rolls, anything like that, this is probably the best way to play. So that's a good way to start, is with Army of the Dead and this power. Then when you start to get better gear, you're going to want to do something different, and you want to go for Shadowblight. And when you play Shadowblight, you can either play with mages or you can play with your Golem. Now, one of the easiest ways to explain it, I guess I could tab into the game and show you just how much stronger your Golem is than all of your mages combined. But probably you can just see it really if you look at some of the buffs here. Golem Mastery has just a higher multiplier than the other masteries. And then when you go into the Paragon node, if you find the legendary power Hulking Monstrosity, it has another massive multiplier. Remember on the blood thing when it had another 50% multiplier? That combined with the golem just naturally hitting way harder, the golem scales way better. And then remember with the shadow mages, their damage increase to you passes along back to your minions, which passes back to your golem. It just keeps ramping and ramping and ramping. So when you go through your endgame gear and you have the golem damage and the we'll get to the ultimate in a second. When you get the golem damage and all the minion attack speed and everything, the golem damage is going to far surpass what the mages can do. Now, the mages are really, really good for speed farming because there's 5 of them. They just shoot everywhere. And it's also like a little bit lazier because the golem can kind of, if the golem's being a dumbass, which sometimes the minions are, it only takes one dumbass to nerf a lot of your damage, but at least you have a little bit of control over it because when you get the cooldown low enough, you can actually use your golem active. But your mages should pretty much just be shooting all the time, just as you run around. There's 5 of them, so I guess it's a little bit more reliable. So going Shadowblight with mages is going to be better for speed farming, and in the end game, definitely the golem is going to scale a lot better. All right, now, why would we do Shadowblight? Well, Shadowblight has an amazing legendary power, first of all. If we can find it here, let's go to the Shadowblight one. Here it is. Where you do 120% increased damage for 6 seconds after you've procced Shadowblight 10 times. Now, Shadowblight is a little bit confusing. If you read that, you need Shadowblight 10 times, and then you go into the skill tree and you read it. Okay, shadow damage, it infects enemies with Shadowblight for 2 seconds. Every 10th time it receives shadow damage, it gets a stack of Shadowblight, but then we need 10 stacks of it to spawn this. And then when that's active for that 6 seconds, you can't gain stacks of Shadowblight to again restart this 10 count. Okay, so really it's all just very confusing. At the end of the day, we need to start stacking Shadowblight. We need many, many instances of shadow damage. And if you're running around playing, you'll notice that maybe your shadow mages are not really stacking it that fast. And so you're going to be thinking, God, this kind of sucks. And I gave up 36% minion attack speed for this. Like, I don't think it's worth it. But there's a solution. And there's really only one good solution that we've seen. This is actually what started the conversation from Maxroll. I went to his stream. I said, hey, buddy, have you found a solution for Shadowblight other than Bone Storm? And he said, no, I haven't. But it seems like Bone Storm is the way and how you will solve everything. So how in the world does that work? First of all, we're saying get rid of the 36% attack speed for the Shadowblight. And then we're also saying get rid of Army of the Dead, which had that big nuke for us. This sounds like a terrible idea, but it really works out once you have Bone Storm and once you have all the right rolls, like the ultimate cooldowns and the Golem active cooldowns. You can eventually get your Bone Storm to come up almost all the time. Like the uptime is pretty insane once you get the CDR roll here, the CDR roll here. And the beautiful part about it is there is this aspect ultimate shadow. So Bone Storm is now going to become a shadow skill, and it's going to apply all these instances of shadow damage, and it's going to pretty much instantly proc your Shadowblight when there's a ton of density. Then you have the massive buff for 6 seconds. Then your Bone Storm will be back up, and then you will just activate it again and do massive damage again. It's going to be a beautiful combination. But that's not all. That wouldn't be enough, right, to make this amazing. The other piece of it is now you get this power, which is the best defensive power for Necros in the entire game. This is why Necros did well last time in Abattoir of Zir, and without it, it wouldn't have happened. Every time Bone Storm damages an enemy, you get a barrier for 6% of your life for 10 seconds. That is godly, because the Bone Storm can be attacking all the time, just give you this massive barrier which will keep you alive, which is going to be critical in the high levels of the pit. In fact, it's so critical that on our best power, our amulet, one of the best options, obviously one of them, the one thing you might think is throw the Shadowblight one on here, and that might be the best play in the ultimate endgame. But first of all, you just got to survive. You got to stay alive. And this 38% damage reduction, especially since Blizzard has removed damage reduction out of the game, is critical. Along with this barrier, you should be feeling real tanky and your minions tanking for you, especially if you want to switch out and go to the Golem, which is going to take 30% of your damage. You're going to lose a lot of damage if you do that. But you, as they say, famously say in MMOs, you can't do any damage if you're dead, right? So the Bone Storm is not just giving you massive access to this 120% damage increase. It's not just giving you one of the best survivability aspects in the entire game. Bone Storm itself is godly. Your damage reduction is increased by 15% while Bone Storm is active, and it gives you 20% crit chance, which gives it to your minions. So you just run around with your merry-go-round. You just destroy everything. Once you have enough cooldown, and remember, your little reapers, because they're bugged, are not only going to spawn corpses everywhere, which you can eat to empower your minions and also give yourself infinite essence, but they're also going to reduce its cooldown so you can spam it. So this seems like by far the best way to solve it. Haven't seen a better way. So this is pretty much what you will be building toward. These are the ideas that should be in your mind, at least with what we know right now. If we find some other way, which is possible, everyone, all eyes in the world are looking at this build. Maybe we'll find something even better. Someone will come up with something. But in the beginning, you just go Army of the Dead and Kalan, and it's easy. You want to transition into Shadowblight with your Bone Storm for all of the great reasons that we just mentioned. Golem should be your target for the end game. If you want to start with mages, like with your tempering, and that if that's all that you're getting, that's perfectly fine for speed farming or low level pit, but it will not scale like the Golem does eventually. So then the $1 million question is, Rax, I don't want to spam my skellies all the time for my priests. Well, you kind of have to no matter what. Let's just say you don't. And Rax, another issue is, so another thing we should talk about is Bone Prison versus Blight. So Bone Prison is going to just trigger your Blight for you with a certain power. Where is it here? Bone Prison spawns a pool of Blight, and then you can also take this one, which is going to pull in enemies into the Blight. And again, that will help you proc your Shadowblight, which is going to make you do 1,000,000 times more damage with this. If you choose not to go the Bone Prison route, you don't have to. You can just manually cast Blight, but that requires you to aim stuff, whereas the Bone Prison just pulls everything in and has a big area. Also, it requires you to have essence management. So if you're someone who hates spamming Raise Skeleton, if you don't have enough essence to cast Blight, it costs 25 essence to throw this, you're screwed. Whereas the Bone Prison doesn't cost anything, it just has a cooldown. And since we're already stacking cooldown feverishly everywhere anyway, because we need it for our ultimate and for our Golem, it's up pretty much all the time. So you just cast Bone Prison in that room, cast a Bone Prison in that room, and there you go. It's honestly easier if you can get used to it. But some people say, you want to know what, Rax? I don't want to do any of that. Macro showed us the Rax's brain dead necro. which is what I asked him about, the Ring of Sacrilegious Soul. It raises your skeletons every second, it casts Corpse Explosion for you, and it does Corpse Tendrils. So the idea here is actually to throw away Blight, which is going to cost us. It's going to be probably more difficult to spawn our Shadowblight, and we lose like 20% damage. So that sucks. But this is automatically casting, and we can get some of it back now because now we can get our Skeletal Priest Empower You. You could also potentially get it on the previous setup. If you had the godliest cooldown ever, you could potentially give away Hulking to get the Skelly Priest power over here as well. But let's just say you run the other one and most people won't get to that level of gear anyway, so you're going to have to use Hulking. You're going to pick this up, which should pretty much offset Blight, which is nice. And this is going to be massive quality of life. It's going to make playing the build a lot easier. You may have to, you will still have to cast Raised Skeleton from time to time, but you don't really need too much essence at all. So it really shouldn't be a problem as long as you can keep all of your buffs up. You can also add Corpse Explosion to your bar now, and you can make it the Blighted Corpse Explosion, again, to try to offset the fact that we couldn't spawn our Shadowblight very well because we lost Blight. Okay? But there's no doubt about it, or this setup is very, very gear intensive. So it's almost like you have to do all of the hard work to make this work perfectly. But yes, you could take your best stab at it and throw this together once you get the Ring of Sacrilegious Soul if you truly want to do absolutely nothing. The output is going to be lower, though, with bad gear. And by the time you have the godly gear and can automate all of this and make this work, well, you already have such good gear that you probably will have already pretty much done everything in the game, and your Golem build will be so powerful that switching to this won't make any sense. So the reason why this is included is this is the lazy man build. If you don't care, no matter what, you just want to make it now, here it is. But the output is lower. There is a cost to it. And the only way to make the output not devastating is to have extremely good gear already, which you would have to farm with this, because this build with shitty gear is not powerful enough to get far enough to make the gear good enough to make this build. All right, so, I mean, it's a lot of talking. So why don't we summarize everything here, because there's a lot of things to digest. So let's go back to the planner and let's just look at it step by step in nice and easy terms, okay? So leveling up, one of the greatest ways is just take the attack speed and take the Army of the Dead. And whatever tempering you get the mages, you get the golem, whatever, it's fine. And you just run around and everything is good. And whenever you see something scary, you just press Army of the Dead and they die. Easy. This, you could play like this the entire time and never change it. Totally fine. When you get into the end game, Shadowblight is the way to go. And the main way to proc that is by using Bone Storm, because Bone Storm is up so often, and it's with this power that it's going to proc your Shadowblight all the time when Bone Storm becomes a darkness skill. That combined with your Shadow Mages is what's going to help you. Building towards mages is nice for speed farming, but what you're probably concerned with at this point in the game is getting far in the pit. To get far in the pit, you will build towards Golem, because the Golem scales way better. It looks like you got a whole army of skellies and they're doing everything for you, but no, your Golem can vastly outscale all of them attacking at the same time if you build it that way. So that is the way that I would recommend you to do it. One question that we didn't talk about earlier is, why are you using a one-hander and an offhand rather than a big old two-hander? That's because, well, not only do you get more cooldown reduction, but this also gives us more access to more of the powers. Necromancers have kind of like the opposite problem of, let's say, the Firewall Sorcerer that I just played. I'm starving on my Firewall Sorcerer for a Firewall-specific stat that does anything for me. everything I'm taking does help me, but it's not like directly correlated to Firewall. It's just too bad. I wish Blizzard would fix that. Necros have the complete opposite problem. Not only are their Paragon boards, I think, way better than most other classes, but they have so many powers that are so strong. If we could just fit them all into one build, and we can't. Having a one-hander and an offhand allows us to get one extra power, which is super valuable. Remember, if you're not sold on the Bone Storm thing, it's up almost all the time. It procs your Shadowblight all the time, and it gives you access to Shielding Storm. And then if you put this DR power on your amulet, you're going to be pretty invincible. And remember, all of your minions are also tanking for you. It's a thing of beauty. So fall in love with Bone Storm and try it with Shadowblight. With this setup, I'll link it. It's from Maxroll, and I'll full link to Maxroll's all of his stuff, and Maxroll as well. We'll put it down there. And then if you want to make the lazy build, this build is kind of like a super endgame build. You need really good gear to make it work. But if you slapped it together, you probably wouldn't notice the difference if you're like a really casual player and you just don't want to try very hard. This is the way to automate it at the cost of losing quite a bit. But you don't have to throw the Bone Prison, and you don't have to throw the Blight. You can just run around and it's going to auto cast all of your skills for you, which is, there is a beauty in that. I just got done playing Righteous Fire and PoE. I ran around and did nothing for a week and loved it. So that's the main things that I wanted to cover for you guys. There's a million different minion builds out there. It's kind of confusing. Like, how do you digest everything? I'm not going through every single skill. I mean, you guys can read. You guys can just copy it. I wanted to talk to you guys about some of the key things about Necromancer. I wanted to show you some of the hilarious things, like the Reaper with 4-minute corpse is infinitely better than pretty much every other choice, and people weren't understanding why people would ever take Skeletal Defender's taunt. They think, oh, they're taunting him off of me. No, it's for the stagger. Just wanted to share with you pretty much all of the knowledge that I've gained in the last couple of days and playing the PTR and talking to Maxroll and reading all the Maxroll guides that I've gathered. And I'm sure it will evolve. I wouldn't be surprised if 1 week from now, everything that I just told you is obsoleted because they found some godly other way to do some amazing things. But I think that what I've shared with you, I hope it will help you. Let me know if it did. Put the planner down below. And one thing I'm going to do, well, I guess this video is going to come out Friday morning. One thing I'm going to do today, I leveled my Necro from 1 to 100 in about 12 and a half hours on the season start. I'm actually going to level another Necro on hardcore. Like, my Necro's alive. Here he is, level 100 hardcore. Here I am standing here. I'm going to level another one. I'm going to use the minion build. I'm actually going to use the minion build that I just showed you. And I'm going to try to level way faster. Same parameters, hardcore, SSF. I'm going to take every risk possible. So honestly, I'm probably going to die before I get to 100. I'm going to try to speed run 1 to 100 as fast as I possibly can. So if you'd like to watch it, love to have you there. And then on Saturday, I'm going to do the same thing again, 1 to 100 speed run, but I'm going to play Barb. So I already have my Necro 100. I already have my Sorcerer 100. By the way, I made my Frozen Orb Sorcerer today. Dude, my Frozen Orb Sorcerer fries everything. I made North Wars build from Maxroll. Some people were coming to my stream saying Frozen Orb sucks. Pfft, bro, I was deleting Nightmare Dungeons like you wouldn't believe. So if you'd like to see the Frozen Orb guide, I can go over the North War guide here, and it's another person you should check out. But dude, my Sorcerer was cooking. My viewers couldn't even believe it once I got it built. Anyway, that's what I know about minions, guys. I hope this helps you like rationalize all the different builds that you might be seeing everywhere and make some decisions about your character. Thank you.